Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to a special Marvel movie talk, one of our Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 special episodes. Very excited to be here talking with some of our regulars, some of our favorites here on the show. And yes, indeed, we are continuing the conversation on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Still Christian Bladt and joined by the one and only Nate Miller. Nate, thanks for being on with us today.
Of course. Thanks for having me. Excited to be
And
back.
and of course, similarly showing off his McDonald's Happy Meal toys is the one and only off Broadway superstar, soon to appear in Little Shop of Horrors in Burbank, the one, the only Count Eric Connor.
Hello, one and all, but we are on Victory. We might be off Broadway, but we are on
But
Victory.
you're on Victory. That's a great
Which
point.
is the Broadway of Burbank, I would argue.
I've been saying that for a long time. There's the rock and roll Ralphs on Sunset, and the Broadway Ralphs is the one on Victory and at Buena Vista. But that's not what we're here to talk about. Believe it or not, we're here to talk about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, the James Gunn's last entry in the Guardian story, at least. And I don't actually know what either of these gentlemen have thought of this film. I like to keep it fresh for the air. I learned from Regis Philbin, save it for the air. But Nate, overall thoughts about this film, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3?
It was great. I liked it a lot. I thought it had a really good balance of heart and comedy and action and stuff. It was very emotional in some sad tearjerker ways, but also in some feel-good ways. And it really felt like the second movie is not my favorite movie, whereas like Guardians 1, I think really changed the MCU. It was a fantastic movie. And I think this really captures the spirit of that first one and brings everybody to a really nice, satisfying end. So yeah, I liked it a lot. My only complaint is that it felt a little bit long, but also because the ending felt very satisfactory or satisfying, like I feel like it. I don't know. The length is not too much of a worry. It was worth
Right.
it in the end.
There's a movie that feels a little too long, and then there's James Cameron or Zack Snyder long. There's different kinds of movies feeling long. And each of these Guardians movies notched 15 minutes extra onto the previous one. The first Guardians was 2 hours and 1 minute. The second was 2:16, and I believe this was 2:31. So each time James Gunn's like, let me squeeze a little bit in there. And I have long had similar feelings about Guardians 2 as you did, Nate. But just last night, I watched it for the first time since I saw it in the theater. And while I'm still surprised at people who say they love the second one as much as the first, I don't see that. I think I appreciate it more having now seen the third one and also had 5 more years of Guardians adventures. I think that it's better than I remembered, which is that's as not the most ringing endorsement, but it's a nice stepping stone for kind of all the characters for where they end up. And it's interesting to think about the hypothetical. What if these 3 movies were able to be told, these 3 stories were able to be told in a vacuum that didn't involve the Avengers and didn't involve Infinity War? Obviously, you have 2 characters who are adopted daughters of Thanos. You can't really do it, but I just sort of wonder if the Guardians had a self-contained trilogy, where it would have gone. But I agree that the first and the third one are very much spiritually in line with each other. And this one definitely sort of recaptured the fun and the excitement of the first one. Mr. Connor, what did you think of Guardians Volume 3?
Yeah, this one I thought was a real nice step up from the previous MCU films. I think James Gunn, I mean, in the middle of all the chaos of his film, and, some of it drags, some of it, like pops off the screen. But he'll have these moments like when they're arguing about which button to hit and it's like 3 minutes of almost like Abbott and Costello like wordplay, and no one else would dare do that in these movies, and yet somehow he does it and makes it work. You know, the I am Groot, I am Groot, I am Groot last time with the button, like which one sets off the bomb. Like somehow in his hands, like I hope Superman has a trace of that humor. I mean, it wouldn't work with as much as they show in Guardians, but I feel like he, as a storyteller, has such a nice light touch that he brings. You know, a little tug in cheek, a little bit of a nudge and a wink, but it tends to work. And yeah, this movie actually did have a fair amount of heart. Maybe sometimes a little much on the sort of, you know, I mean, I see Nate's dog is hanging out on his lap, and you know, mine's just off camera at all times, ready to bark. And you know, like, yeah, if you put animals in peril, we're gonna feel stuff. But yet at the same time, when the emotions, or even the toys that we stole from our own children, you know, but in the end of it all, like, it still got me emotionally, you know, more than once. The stuff with Gamora and Peter Quill, I thought was really, really special. And I mean, I think DC's in very good hands for at least a little while with what he brings to them. So Marvel was foolish to treat him the way they did, because they lost a real talent who I think is going to maybe save the DC universe while he's leaving the MC one.
Yeah, I mean, to their credit, they did rehire him, but I know what you're saying. You know, the fact that
Once
he
bitten,
was ever
twice
able
shy.
the fact that he was ever able to get away and, you know, just dip
Yeah.
his toe in DC, it's you know, it's definitely a rare miss, but at least they are able to get this story in there. You know, in terms of the emotions, I think it's an interesting point, because I saw the film twice, a week apart, and I remembered very well what was happening. And somehow, even knowing what the end result was and how it's not as tragic as it might seem in the moment, it still was very moving and very emotional, just because of the way that it was so well done. There, I like these characters, so I don't want to say that I'm disappointed. In an earlier conversation, we were talking about this. I'm not disappointed that none of these characters died. I'm just surprised that it happened, and I think it would have put a little bit more weight on it. I didn't want them all to die, but I think the one that I always go back to is Drax, because Bautista has been very upfront about not wanting to be his character anymore. I think I was shocked about that end credit scene, that we're going to get more out of Star-Lord. I just figured, you know, Chris Pratt's going to move on. You know, he allegedly has done his last Jurassic movie. So, you know, I just kind of expected.
I hope
so. Well, there's that too. But so I think that it you know, that it kind of took away from it a little bit, because there are these really emotional potential death scenes. And the idea that Star-Lord could have died running back for his Zune, almost saving himself, and just, you know, bumping into some space junk. It's also infuriating that the one time that this guy who has a magic helmet that can go over his face, the one time he doesn't have it is the time where he could have died in space. But I don't know. I kind of wonder, was there a mandate from Feige that was, you tell the story you want, none of them can die. I don't care who you were planning on killing. I don't know that that's necessarily the case. Were you surprised at all, Nate? That's my first question for you. Did you think, even in the moment as we were watching, like, oh, okay, maybe Rocket actually, you know, to have almost gone through all of that to almost save Rocket, if he then died on the table, I would have been like, oh man, that's a bummer, you know?
I was muted. No, there's no world with a Disney-owned Marvel where that happens.
Yeah.
As impactful as that would be, I don't know. I was not, after, when I was reading about the movie after I saw it, I was reading a lot of people talking about how they were surprised that like nobody died. They expected a bunch of people to die. I didn't really go into the movie thinking that. And I think all of the character endings that they got were very satisfying for their arcs. and I don't really see where them dying would have made the story any better. Yeah, I was happy with it. I will say I was surprised to see that Star Lord was like gonna return with that stinger at the end.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure. I'm curious what they're gonna do with him. Even though, to be honest, I don't care. He was the least interesting part of this movie for me. The only part that was remotely good with him was him. Um, and the scenes with him and Gamora towards the end of the film when he's like actually completing his arc character change, those
Yeah.
were good. But for most of the movie, this movie was about Rocket and Nebula, and then with Drax and Mantis supporting them, and like Star Lord just happens to be there as he pines away over Gamora still.
Yeah, no, I know it's not the character that you're necessarily the most excited with. It's intriguing that they would continue his story. And Dominicus Saxon points out, I saw a morning showing. There were not many people, but a couple were audibly choking back sobs in places. And these are Idaho people. It takes a lot to make them cry. So that tells us something. Ghost 8386. I enjoyed Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I had fun with Quantumania. I think that I enjoyed this movie more than the last few. I'm not as down on the last few Marvel movies as some people are. I like Doctor Strange. I like Quantumania. But I don't feel like I need to I don't need to defend Love and Thunder, but I didn't hate it because it was like I don't know what anybody expects from a fourth movie. We've talked about that a lot. I didn't hate it. I just hated the musical selection, especially when you contrast it to a film like this. But Eric, in terms of some of the on-screen emotions, the actual tears on the screen, and possibly cheers and tears in the old TV guide, cheers and jeers in the audience. What are your thoughts on the emotions of Guardians 3?
The deep tracks, they never are far from your tongue, Christian, and it makes me appreciate you even more deeply because of that. I was thinking back to like the first movie when the moment that really just cement. I mean, I enjoyed all of the first film, but that moment at the end when Rocket's sitting there with just a little piece of Groot, and then Drax goes over and just sort of pets him, and I just remember like I having so much feeling for that moment. I'm like, wow, like I'm sitting here getting a little misty eyed for a CG raccoon that talks and swears and whatnot, getting pet by Dave Bautista, and I totally bought it, and I think that's what's so impressive in this. Even the stuff that with the animal torture might be a bit much, but beautiful voice work from Linda Cardellini as the what was it? She's not bad.
Lila.
Yeah,
Lila. She's an otter. Yes,
otter. Thank you. Yeah, like, and it's interesting, right? Because she's already in the Marvel universe, but
yeah, right. She also plays Hawkeye's wife. Yeah,
and really, even like all four of them, like I was like, my God, like I really care about the four of them, and that's I mean, how you pull that off. That's James Gunn's real talent. Is he makes us care about the things you would never imagine you would actually buy into, much less care about.
Right. I mean, I think that there's a couple of parts to that. One of them is the fact that these Guardians characters that you have, when you look at them, you think about the fact that obviously their ranks have expanded, but you have a bug girl, you have a talking astronaut dog, you have a raccoon, and you have a giant tree, and then you have a bunch of aliens and, a half robot woman, I mean, you have these characters and you're like, how did they possibly make us care so much about them? And then wrap into that the fact that the scenes with Rocket and his friends, Teefs and Floor, and you're just like, just imagine reading a description of that, I don't know, 10 years ago, and you're like, well, that sounds stupid. You're just like, and it's arguably the most emotional stuff in the film, is really getting to see those characters and just the simple idea that it is good to have friends. And what's not good is to watch them all get massacred right in front of you. And just the viciousness with which Rocket rips off the High Evolutionary's face. And, seeing that at the end of the movie, just his handiwork. I mean, I was talking about this on our friend Andy Smith's show the other day. It's like I haven't seen that kind of prosthetics. For fans of the Hannibal Lecter universe, there's a character named Mason Verger, and it's kind of a very similar thing. Half his face is gone because I believe it was Hannibal who bit half of it off. But in any case, or it was Wild Pigs. I actually forget which one. They both factor into that story. But the point is, it's like they're dealing with this whole spectrum of emotions, just sad and the violence. And I find it interesting because I've read more than one person, some who I've known very well, that were very upset by some of the treatment of the animals on screen. And I think that it's a great way to tell that story because I don't think that they showed too much. I mean, the sounds of, we get to hear Rocket basically being created. And that's one of the most powerful moments in the movie where Nebula's watching and she's like, this is worse than what Thanos did to me.
Yeah.
A character that we established cut her eyes out and replaced them. In addition to a number of other things. And I was just like, I think that it's a strong statement. It's a powerful statement. And I don't know. I mean, I think that, people who are upset by it, I don't think it's accidental, because obviously somebody like the High Evolutionary is a truly, just terrible sort of person. He's willing to destroy a planet when he's like, oh yeah, whoopsie, that didn't really go the way I thought it would. And just so reactionary that in the moment, basically Star-Lord's like, yeah, I saw that drug deal. And that's when he's like, yeah, obviously I need to blow up the planet. Like he was going to do it anyway. He's like, yeah, you're right. I need to do it right now. Thanks for making the point. But someone who's never come on here and blown up a planet is our friend Kaitlin Cornell. Kate, thank you. The last time I checked, you hadn't, but I
thank God someone's checking.
I could absolutely be wrong. We're just playing with the squares here. But
I know I'm like all over the place.
I know. I want to finish sort of the thought that we're kind of dealing with is some of these emotions. Nate, I wanted to kind of let you weigh into, having a trilogy with these established characters and obviously their appearances in multiple MCU films. That's the only way that you can get us to care about the fact that a talking raccoon might have died in this movie. And I don't know, I feel like it's a pretty strong accomplishment. What are your thoughts about making us care about these characters in a way that maybe even in the first movie you wouldn't have imagined was possible?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, it's that amount of time. It's that every extra 15 minutes he's added every movie, and it helps too that some of these characters have been, there's the Christmas special, there's the Avengers movies, like there's the Thor stuff. Like at this point in time, we've seen these characters for many years, and especially someone like Nebula, who just so drastically has changed. The characters feel a lot more real and relatable than I think what happens in a lot of, I won't say MCU specifically, but like superhero genres.
Sure.
The one thing I will say though is with Rocket, I think he did use a little bit of a cheat code because that scene with the little baby raccoons and the eyes, if you can find someone who is not emotionally invested in Rocket after that scene, we should keep very close tabs on them because that is a cheat code. It's not fair. They're very cute, and I, knowing what was going to happen, immediately got very upset.
Yeah.
But that using that connection that we have with them, and especially having the plot device of Rocket being sick through 95% of the movie, and seeing everyone how they react and what they have to do to try to save their friend. Like, that's a really cool way to visually show the bond that they built like over time. But really, like I said before, I love the ending of this so much, not only just from a movie perspective but a trilogy perspective. Like, having Nebula have a place, a home to build up, like having Rocket lead the team, finally him saying, like, claiming the name of Raccoon after like reading the thing and crying about being called a raccoon like for years. It was very, very satisfying. And yeah, I don't know, I definitely was more invested in the characters in this movie than I was in like the second movie, for sure.
Right. And I think that, I mean, it is a full 5 years since that second movie. And it's not like we haven't had them in our lives since then, as you were saying, I mean, and some of the most important character moments, especially for, the original Gamora and for Peter, happen in movies that aren't these Guardians movies. I mean, that's really an Infinity War. Kate, sort of talking about the emotions for these characters and just kind of overall thoughts about what you were thinking as you were watching this, and some of the emotions that perhaps went through you as you were watching Guardians 3.
So I watched it twice. I wasn't as emotional as I expected to be the first time I watched it, but I was the second time, and I don't know if it's.
I'm just going to interrupt because I actually said the same thing. Somehow I was more emotional the second time, and I can't quite put my finger on why that was.
I don't know what just happened with my microphone.
I believe that's a foghorn. We all have to get back on the cruise ship before they leave Cabo. So let's make sure that we
periscope down. Periscope down.
Just thinking that.
But anyway, sorry. So you were more emotional the second time.
I was, and I don't know if it's because I knew where the story was headed. That's not me, is it?
That's all right. It's actually fairly minor, whoever it is, and
okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
So, what I will say about this movie is I think it's the best example that MCU has done, and especially since it's the same writer and the same director. He definitely had an end game in mind, and he definitely had this is where I want to take these characters and what I want to explore with these characters. And so the emotional endings for all of these characters, or the emotional conclusions for all these characters, felt really balanced. I didn't feel like any character was left out. I felt like if they didn't get as much of an emotional focus, it was because we had gotten them in the last movie. But every character kind of like at the end of that, when I need to talk to everybody and you had everybody's conclusion of what they needed to do, it felt like the story and the characters going through the story through all three movies made emotional sense. So it didn't feel like anything was like ending. It just felt like their journeys were just beginning to kind of figure out who they were. And we just weren't going to see all of them. And the characters that did have a conclusion, like Drax, it's like, I don't need to be a destroyer. You need to be a dad. And that was taken from you. And Nebula, who needs to grow a family, it's like, we don't need to see that, but we know that that's the conclusion. And the characters that are like, I'm not finished yet, they get to go off and do their own thing without the Guardians. So in a way, like the Guardians became the crutch of them learning how to be a family, and then learning that they needed to find their own family and learn who they were. So, Rocket's the big one, obviously. And I like how they kept by doing it almost entirely in flashback, or having that video of what the High Evolutionary did, it kept his character of, I don't talk about stuff.
Yeah.
But the last words he had in Guardians 2 was understanding where Yondu was coming from. And of course, that was the kind of torch pass to his emotional journey in this one. And then you see the kind of mask, like, what does it take to be what does a man mean, or what does it mean to be a man? Which is almost, I think, one of the thesis statements that James Gunn is working with all of his male characters, kind of come to a conclusion. throughout the second one and the third one. So yes, a lot of people were like, oh, the second one wasn't as good as the third one, but it's like the second one kind of set up where the third one was going emotionally. Like Quill passing the torch of leadership to Rocket would not have been as powerful without the fights in the second movie and without the kind of like bombastic, like, I can fly the ship better than you and I can be a better leader than you. And I'm better. Like it was the kind of concession of you are the better leader and I want to pass it to you because I'm not ready and I need to go do some things first.
Right. Yeah, that's actually what I was saying earlier is that I had rewatched the second one last night and I hadn't seen it in 5 years since I saw it in the theater. And there's a lot more to it. It's, if I'm ranking the three of them, it's still my least favorite. And I think that middle movie is it's always tough. I mean, it's a lot of time. It's a lot of setup. I know it's sacrilege, but my least favorite in the original Star Wars trilogy is Empire Strikes Back because it's all set up and no payoff. And I know it's not a very popular opinion, and it's fine. It is much more accurate when we talk about Back to the Future. That second Back to the Future, you're like, I'm like, you're kidding me. We at no point did we ever know that he couldn't be called chicken before. There's like so much things that are just like, well, we're setting up the third movie.
I do have to say though, we're talking a lot about the guys, but the writing of the women in this movie was so spectacular, and it's some of the best female character writing that Marvel has done in their entire cinematic canon. Because you have the new Gamora, that's not the new Gamora, but like, she's gone off on her own journey and it's completely character driven. And Nebula, who's now taken on this role as I want to be kind of a nurturer and a protector, like taking care of Quill the way she does and going through, we don't kill anyone, which is what Gamora was saying when she was in the Guardians.
Yeah.
And how they solve problems and the kind of ferocity in which they solve problems. While still being humorous and while still the humor comes from the fact that they all disagree on how to do stuff, which is family oriented comedy. It's like they took a sitcom and just went, but when Gamora fights back against what Quill wants her to be, and it's like, what are you so afraid of that I need to be something for you? Was one of the most powerful lines I think has been said by a female character in a superhero movie ever. And it can't be ignored. And if people who want to dive into the use of a Mary Sue or the use of female characters to build up male characters in these types of movies, that was them fighting back against that trope. And it really sets up where Gamora is able to come to these conclusions on her own without anybody helping her. That she goes through his stuff and finds the picture and because she's now stuck on this journey with them, she accesses those parts of herself that Quill fell in love with because they're always a part of her. It's just her connection to Quill isn't there, that he wants to happen. And he needs to find a way to not be as connected to her. And so when she turns to him on the planet and says, I don't think we were in love.
Yeah.
There's a part of me in the movie that going, girl, I think you're right. You're right.
Well, I do like that she amends it after they spend more time together. And she's like, I bet we were fun. It's not negating that comment. It's like, I bet we had fun. But I like that this Gamora, we know our original Gamora, we know the end of her arc, but that Peter even tells her that you don't fit in with the Ravagers, you're not one of them. Well, we see the moment pretty much at the end of the movie where actually she does fit in, and they're so glad that she's home. And it's like, you're always looking for a family. It's like, look, she found it. She just didn't find it with all of you, which I think is, it's a good choice. I think the worst thing that could have happened was for this Gamora to suddenly also be like head over heels with in love with Peter Quill, when any of that we ever had happened off screen between really, you start to see it in Guardians 2, but I believe, because I was talking about this earlier, I had looked it up. I think that for the narrative, there's 4 years between Guardians 2 and Infinity War. And I don't mean release date. I mean story time. And it's like, there's a lot that happened in there, I think, and you're not going to be able to rush that into even a 2.5 hour movie. And I'm glad they didn't, I think that, what we were saying earlier is all of these characters, they really did a good job balancing out where they ended up from the first movie. And in Gamora's case, she's not exactly the same character, but she's the same person, just plucked out of the timeline at a different point. Was there anything that you felt, Nate, was lacking for any of the main characters? Anything that you thought that maybe we were going to get? Anything that you felt like, oh, they didn't hit the right note there? I mean, I don't actually have anything, so it's not really like a loaded question. I'm just curious, and I'm kind of asking everybody if there's anything that you felt like didn't quite work for you personally.
Honestly, maybe the Adam Warlock stuff.
Sure.
That felt very like, oh, I set this up, I have to kind of make this pay off kind of a thing. And I think it worked out very well. He was used very creatively. It added to some of the emotional themes, as well as, gave them a nice, superpowered, big, strong guy to help them fight, But other than that, like, I feel really, really happy with like Kate said it perfectly. Like, especially this one is essentially like an ensemble film, and it felt like everybody got really great time. Like, even Cosmo, like, got
Cosmo
a lot
was my
of great
favorite.
lines. Like, that was excellent.
Yeah, the bad dog runner throughout the bad dog running throughout the movie, and it was like a great way to really bring Kraglin into the movie a little bit more. You had that, and it's like pairing up Drax and Mantis, which obviously we saw a little bit in Volume 2, but that's the majority of the Christmas special. And I think James Gunn is very good at figuring out which of his characters work well together. You definitely saw that throughout the first season of Peacemaker as well. I agree with all of that. I think I was talking about this just the other day, that Adam Warlock, I think they needed to kind of have him dialed down from like the 11 that the character could be at to like a 3 or 4, because he's too powerful. It's like Carol Danvers. She's too powerful to just drop into the wrong story.
They need to give him a place to go.
Yeah, I think that exactly. They need to give him a place to go.
Well, the problem is that they're skipping ahead in terms of power creep. Like, Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, is way stronger than like Captain Marvel. Like, there's levels of the comics where they were like, oh, this has to be stronger. And then when the MCU was, they started pulling from stuff and just grabbing stuff that was like way up ahead, and then being like, oh crap, she's in space. That's why she's not here. She's in space because she's way too strong. She would crush everything. So Adam I do like the premise, though, of him being like kind of childlike and underdeveloped. And that is kind of like his foil to being super strong. I'm curious to see where they go with that. I do want to say really quick before I forget something that Kaitlin said. I don't like the second Guardians, not because of the setup that leads to a very satisfying conclusion in 3, but because of how much it feels like it's really like an Avengers spinoff. Like, there's so much of it that is leading to the Infinity War stuff that I feel like it doesn't. Whereas like the first film and the second film are just like really fun space sci-fi action comedies that just happen to also take place in the Marvel universe with like Marvel stuff. Like, for me, a big thing that really stands out about that is like the organic stuff, the organic planets with all that thing. Like, that was so like deep lore, cosmic, like out there, like nothing we've seen in the MCU. All the aliens we've seen have been mostly sanitized, like nothing that's really truly like, let's really expand our minds and think about what could be out there. And for me, that was when I was really like, oh, that's what gave me the feeling I got watching the first movie, was that like he's taking characters that a lot of people don't know that much about, and so he's able to make it its own, like really self-contained, like really thought out world. And I felt like this one took more advantage of that, whereas like the second one was more of like, we have to do MCU tie-ins.
The second one I just want to counterpoint that. The second one was more about setting up what parenthood meant from 4 characters' perspective. So that's why it feels unbalanced, and even a little bit with like the B story, like the A storyline is Quill and his 2 fathers. The B storyline is Rocket, understanding where parenthood comes from, like the Rocket Quill and Rocket Yondu thing, and then C would be in terms of the emotional character storyline is Nebula and Gamora with the sisterhood thing. So it's like you have brothers, parents, and step parents, and so it's like when you take it as like a character study of one familial concept throughout multiple characters, it's kind of like that, and it loses the space adventure quality, which I think that people missed. But unfortunately, like I feel like you needed that base in order to.
I agree.
Yeah.
You don't get the connection that we have even with Nebula at the start of the film without what she went through in the second movie, and Rocket's whole thing like doesn't really make sense as much without his relation to Peter and Yondu and seeing that relationship. And also I think that's why I think it's good that like nobody really died, because we've already been dealing with death with them. Like death is like a cheap end to a character. Sometimes it makes sense, it feels good, and it's a satisfying conclusion, like Yondu sacrificing himself. But I think with this movie, like just like Kate said, talking about all, like the even if we don't have to see Drax be a dad, like because of how we've seen him go and change, and like
we know
also getting to know him more right, exactly, we can see that. And like and when that happened, I was like she was gonna say, you should be Drax the dad, or whatever she says. I knew what she was gonna say, and in my heart I was like, oh, that's so good. Like that's such a good conclusion to that character. Yeah, I am just there's a lot of these MCU movies I feel like don't always deliver on the endings, and I feel like this one like checked all of my boxes for a great like comic book ending. There is still setup for more stuff. The characters can do new things, but there is complete character arcs, things that have changed, like actual status quo change and resolutions. And I am really bummed that this is his last Guardians movie. I'm excited to see what he's going to do with DC, but I am also apprehensive of like the next person that takes over, whatever Rocket Raccoon does.
Can I move back to the comment? And I just, because I want to really have a discussion about the Adam Warlock character that Nate brought up. My perspective is let's take Adam Warlock from a different perspective entirely. Is we've been through these characters. I think Eric mentioned, like, we've been through these like years and years of these characters. And so we kind of know them at different points of their evolution. And so they're the more mature, not mature in character, but like they're on we don't have a lot of the older Avengers characters or people who were in the war. We know these characters are some of the oldest of the MCU that we still have. And so I think we needed that kind of new, bright, powerful, but out of control quality that the first one had. So for me, Adam Warlock was bringing back that literal energy that James Gunn wrote in the first one, where everyone was kind of like not overpowered, but just like they didn't have any focus. And it was like 5 people that were not the Guardians yet, that were all firing their stuff separately.
And they were always in over their heads, like very quickly.
And
films.
And so you have Adam Warlock that takes all 5 of them, all 5 of that energy, and just bashes people with it. And it's like, oh, that's what that first movie felt like. Oh, shit. Like, oh, right. You have this, like, so it was like he was almost in a different movie on purpose, because everyone's focused on, I need to save my friend. And then you have this fucking kid-like asshole going, but I'm supposed to be doing this, which was what the theme of the first movie was about. I'm supposed to be this thing. I'm supposed to be a destroyer. I'm supposed to fight for Thanos. I'm supposed to be the Star-Lord. It's all about the presentation of something versus what they want to be, or making a different choice because they feel like they can. And when Adam Warlock feels like he can make a different choice, he does. So in a way, Adam Warlock represents to me what James Gunn was doing in the first movie, bringing in the themes from the second movie and concluding it in the third movie with having one singular goal for the Guardians that was always getting foiled by this fucking kid.
When I also thought Adam had maybe the funniest moment in possibly all 3 films, which is when he was torturing that guy and his torture consisted of frying him to a crisp.
Yeah.
and it was like one of those moments where I saw this with my boys, and my 12-year-old I knew would love that. Like the second like he's doing it, I'm like, oh, I know where it's gonna go. And the second he stops, the guy's smoldering, you see bones, and my 12-year-old was like losing his mind because I was losing my mind because the 12-year-old in me was finding that to be so brilliantly funny. And I think to your point, right, it's like Warlock comes in like a bat out of hell.
Yeah.
And at first, I think you're making a really nice point there, because at first I'm like, all right, this is a little much. But you're right, there is that sense of like chaos that was always a runner throughout the Guardians universe. So even like that part in the second one where they're arguing and then they crash.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's the Guardians. Like they're kind of like, ramshackle.
But it's like, unfortunately, we have a Guardians team that's like been through some shit and figured out, and they're a team. Like they're all fixing the town together.
Yeah.
And like I love that moment when Mantis is like, Drax, you should dance. Dancing's for idiots. And then they're all dancing by the end. So they're still stuck in that. Rocket can't talk about his emotions. Quill can't talk about how much he's Mrs. Gamora. Drax doesn't want to dance because he don't want to look like a fool. But they're all fixing this town. And then this fucking missile just comes in. Like, hey, remember?
Yeah.
Remember what we used to do? Boom. And it's like, oh, I don't want to do this again. I just want to snap.
No, I think it's a very nice balance that it's a theme of really all of these movies, that the realization that they're not just friends, they're not coworkers, that they really are each other's family. And in a lot of ways they're the only family they have. And it's sort of like a nice wrinkle that Mantis is Quill's sister, because it's like
sister.
Yeah.
Okay, so I didn't watch the Christmas special.
Yeah.
That's from the second. That's from volume 2.
It's a deleted scene from volume 2. So,
but then they circle back on
she
it
tells
in the
Drax
Christmas
about
special.
it in a deleted scene from volume 2, and then she tells him in the Christmas special. And the Christmas special, it's a little Christmassy, but it's actually very funny. It's a great vehicle for Drax and Mantis to get into some nonsense.
Yeah, I'm not gonna watch it. So she's related to his grandfather?
Because Ego fathered her.
Oh.
Yeah,
we're all Kurt Russell kids. Let's just be honest.
Oh, so she's
Kurt Russell
also
got
one
around.
of the kids that he like.
Yeah.
Gotcha,
So when he was
because there's
impregnating,
there's all those.
At that point, like you got a lot of if that's the criteria.
Well, no,
like,
because the rest of them are dead. We saw their skeletons.
The rest of them died
too. Yeah,
because that's
like
in
why
volume
did
2.
Mantis
That's
die?
all of the skeletons in the bottom.
Because
I
he
got
had
that
a
part.
use. Because Ego had a use for her. She helped him sleep.
Oh, I
and
guess
calm
because
down.
she was there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So she's the only one until Quill came along. That
I
she had a
completely
use for.
missed all of that.
But you also then missed the great Easter egg where the back of the newspaper, Kevin Bacon.
The Kevin Bacon.
No, I did see that. I knew about the Kevin Bacon thing, so I did get that part.
What's fun too when you watch in the theater and you could hear who saw the Christmas special.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Right, like a third of the audience laughed very hard, and the other two-thirds
special. Yeah,
right, and the other two-thirds are like, "What? What are we missing?"
The second time I went, there was one of those. It's like the person who's being a know-it-all, but only because the person next to them had a lot of questions, and I'm like, all right, I get it. But the other two characters that I wanted to.
Way Home.
And the other two characters.
And when the lawyer came out, and I was like, oh, and he's like, why? Is it just a lawyer? I'm like, no, it's from the TV. You don't. Yeah. Never mind. It's Charlie Cox. Just keep going.
The other two characters I wanted to circle back to, something that came up, is the other two characters that are actually also family. I mean, adopted family, but still family. I wanted to ask you, Eric, your thought on the way that they were able. And look, the scene's in the trailer, but they talk about it. They're in that elevator, and it's really like this version of Nebula is a lot more like that version of Gamora. This version of Gamora is really a lot like that version of Nebula. Talk a little bit about the way that James Gunn is able to, over time, juxtapose these two characters and what you thought about watching that play out.
Well, I think with Nebula too, it's like it's just kind of like an expansion, right? Because Nebula started off as kind of a one-note villain. And I think part of it, too, is realizing they have a really good performer under all that latex and makeup, And so I think it was a matter of, like, with time. And I don't know if you saw Jumanji, the actresses in the second.
Karen
Jumanji.
Gillan, who most of us know from Doctor Who first, but I know she was also in Jumanji. Yeah.
And she's great in that, and so clearly, like, there's more she could do if tasked upon, and I think, like, they made her just so much more interesting with each time she's appeared. She's become much more of a presence within the Guardians. So I think it's a good use of her, and it was a trailer moment, but her comedic timing's pretty great. I mean, and I think also too, Avengers Endgame, like her scenes with Iron Man were the ones that it was almost like her coming out party as a character.
Yeah, I mean, the movie starts with like basically, her and Tony trapped in space, and you're just like, eventually you're gonna have to develop a sense of humor, because
it's Terminator 2, right? It's like he learns how to be more human from the humans, and so did she. And so I think her journey over the course of multiple films definitely, like, you could feel it, and it tracks nicely, and then it pays off quite well here. I mean, I think, her and Peter Quill getting it on, maybe down the road, but I'm glad they didn't do it here.
I mean, I want to know what she can do with that arm. That's all I'm saying.
All right, so I wasn't the only
version
one
of this movie that currently is on the dark web.
That thing do?
You mean the knockoff version that's currently in production at Vivid Entertainment, which I believe is apparently not subject to the writer's strike. Go figure. Our friend in the chat, Craig Robinson from across the pond, wanted to know what we thought about the inclusion of the Nathan Fillion character. I thought it was funny. I liked the kind of the gag of it. Yeah, I got one of those guys too. It didn't distract me from it. I thought that, look, in a different movie, like a different MCU movie, you would have been like, all right, I don't know about that. I think he fit in really well in a Guardians movie. And, it's not like he got that much screen time. I think that he had like really 2 scenes that featured him. But I want to know what the three of you think. Are you agreeing with Craig that maybe it was a bit over the top? I'll ask you first, Nate, what you thought of Nathan Fillion's character. You're muted again. You got the little.
Tell him.
Yeah. We could have all just sat there and nodded.
Everybody just smile and nod. That's right.
Yeah.
Whatever. That's bullshit.
Nate's making more sense than me this week.
For a cameo, I did feel like it was a little long. However, I do agree that I thought the bit was funny. I don't know, like
cameo.
Well, I mean, at a certain point, it's not anymore. When
there's a cameo, and then there's a cameo plus. This is definitely a cameo plus. Like there's a cameo that they charge $50 for, and then there's $1,000 cameo.
Go ahead.
I thought it was funny though. I like Nathan Fillion.
Yeah,
I agree with you that it fits. I don't know if thematically is the right word, but vibe-wise, it fits the vibe of the movie for sure. Especially being the last. I know that he and Gunn are friends, and that he's been in every Guardians movie.
Yes, he has.
So to me, it makes sense to make his role a little bit bigger, and you can actually see his face in the last one. That whole sequence, I was just losing it at the organic stuff, like them cutting into the wall and the eyes and like everything. I was just like, I was grossed out and also fascinated, and also it was hilarious, and I was so overwhelmed. I've only seen it once. I need to watch some of it again. Like the thing, all the spores and stuff on their body. I don't know, but I thought it was good. I liked the cameo of his wife even better, to be honest.
Yeah, I thought that it's very funny that she gets shot in the leg, so she's able to kind of react the way that we're very comfortable seeing her at that level of anger when we see her in the DC universe. And I thought that the woman that Peter tries to sweet talk. I thought that the casting of all these funny, weird, silly little characters, including the guy who looks like
too.
Right. Yeah, it's the same as Ratcatcher 2. And including the non-verbal performance from the guy who looks like a carrot, who I believe that's actually a female in that prosthetic. Just the funny gag of like, let's kill that guy who looks like a carrot. It's just you know, these little moments, even by themselves, don't work in other movies, but I think in Guardians movies,
You're hopelessly in love with
yeah,
Drax.
right. Oh yeah. Well, I love that moment
Drax the
because Drax is
Destroyer.
like every time, and Mantis is just like, exactly, just so excited. Before we get to our last round of what we're thinking, I do want to highlight, and I always have so much trouble saying Chukwudi Awuji's name. He was also great in Peacemaker, just a completely different performance in
Character.
this as High Evolutionary. Ghost 8386 points out that he described High Evolutionary as narcissistic, sociopathic, but very charming. I think he's got moments where he's charming. You can see how people follow him, but even to the point where his own people are like, this guy's literally killing us. We're going to have to step up and try and beat him. And I think it's very tough to have that level of performance where you're that kind of crazy character, but also like Adam Warlock, they were very smart in notching down his abilities because, you have it all be about the technology because he's too powerful. The High Evolutionary from the comics could have defeated all of the Guardians and all the Avengers, fairly easily. What were you going to say about this, Kate?
I don't know that people followed him. I'm not convinced.
They were scared of him. I mean, they didn't run away.
Will you let me finish my thought?
Sure.
Thank you. There's a scene that they went before the scene with Rocket when it's like, how did you know? The how did you know scene, which is arguably the best written scene in the whole movie. That and the death of Lila. But before that, there's a little line that people could miss of he was in the middle of his treatments. So it's like the two people on his side were mostly his handlers that had to turn against him and almost try to put him down.
Yeah.
And then Lila has a line of, there are the hands that made us, and then there are the hands that guide the hands. So I'm not entirely convinced that the High Evolutionary was the last rung of the tier. That he was the figurehead, and he was brilliant. But it was like there were people around him kind of keeping him in check. Because it wasn't like he was getting facial treatments because Rocket hadn't scratched his face yet at that point. And then the amount of that obsessive insanity. And I got to give it props to him because to do that scene crouched so he's eye level with what would have been Rocket when Rocket wasn't really there. And to do the entire scene almost like coiled up with the like, how did you know? Like he becomes very feral. And as opposed to juxtaposed against what we know of the 2 Kangs that we've seen, or the 5 Kangs that we've seen at this point, if you include the deleted scene. But to have a character that is that emotionally driven and grounded, but a little bit off kilter, obsessively so, the performance was incredible. And I think that's why we needed Nathan Fillion. That's why we needed Orgo Corp so badly. Like we needed like the bureaucratic, like no one really wants to be there. And people are just like, I just want to do like clock in and clock out type of environment, which Nathan Fillion is very good at performing. And that's why he was in the movie for so long, because we have this freaking insanity that is like the insanity, the one of the best villains Marvel has created so far. But it's also like you needed that juxtaposition of the obstacle being slightly, horrible word to say, but it's the only word, boring in comparison, like mundane in comparison to this craziness. So you have like, when you look at the macro as a whole, you look at the macro story and the macro characters, if you have like an evil obstacle and an insane villain, it's too much of the same tonality. So you can have a little bit of variance to make your insane villain more scary in comparison to this corporation. That's all I was going to say. I think that Nathan Fillion had a purpose in the macro, and that's why he was there for so long, as opposed to just like, here's a cameo, goodbye.
Right. And I think it's always, you need it to be more nuanced than, have the stage direction above the dialogue, parentheses, act crazy, because there's so much more to it.
Don't do that, writers.
That's a great moment, though, that you're talking about, where they point out, he's in the middle of his treatments. So that also explains why they don't just, toss him in the fireplace immediately. The idea it's like, yeah, we'll kill him tomorrow.
Is he one?
But
Is he experiment one? Is he group one?
right. And let's spend a moment on the evolutionary, though. Eric, I wanted to get your thoughts on the high evolutionary and how, apart from not giving us his purple and bright pink armor from the comics, other than that, I think that the choices made for translating him on screen, I thought were great.
You talked before about like the fact that a lot of that was practical, like makeup and latex, and I thought that was a great choice. Like the fact that his face is really not even his face. That it's just a mask. And I don't know if you guys saw, James Gunn posted a picture of the actor playing with a dog. And and in some ways, I wonder if like he's like, hey James, you mind? I like animals. Do you mind just letting the world know so people don't hate me on the street when they see me? And it was such a cute picture. It was like the set dog, But I think it was a great character in that, like, we understood him. He was diabolical, but yet there was a logic to him. And then we also see, he had like his own medical issues that he was working on. So he actually had a bit of skin in the game, no pun intended. And then, of course, when Rocket like rips him to shreds, I thought that was actually a really intense moment, like legitimately intense, where we see like Rocket basically become Rocket. Like Rocket basically is having his Wolverine moment.
Well, and to the point that High Evolutionary was trying to like make these other creatures, like you, where you're not so angry, but then like let's not forget that you can push anything, and look what happens to Rocket. So I thought that it was a nice balance. Ghost 8386 had put a couple of these lines from High Evolutionary that I wanted to have in here before I talk to you about High Evolutionary, Nate. It was this moment to his conversation with Star-Lord. I'm not trying to conquer the universe. I'm perfecting it. And there was another moment that he says to, one of his minions, there is no God. That's why I stepped in. This seems like someone that, might have a little bit of an inflated opinion of themselves. But what did you think about sort of, this big threat in this movie? I mean, how they basically have him trying to remake the universe. Nate.
I liked it, especially from the aspect of the kind of intergalactic space setting. It's cool, this idea that he has been out there for a while and has made whole civilizations and stuff that just exist, like the Sovereign, like that's a thing that he just did, and they're just out there. He's definitely not on the level of like Killmonger, of like, wow, I think he might be kind of right, just doing things wrong. Like he had intentions for sure. I don't know if I really ever sympathize with him, just because to say that like I'm not trying to conquer, I'm just trying to perfect it. But that's like, who decides what's perfect? Like what by whose standards? I think the performance was incredible, and a lot of the like fight sequences were cool. I do think they did a good job of powering him down so he was able to be, exist in that world in a way that made sense, but still was strong enough to be like a threat. The one complaint I do have is the whole like his people turning on him thing. I feel like it was just kind of underbaked. Like it just didn't feel like it was something that was the movie was leading towards. It just kind of like happened that he was getting mad and they were like, actually, you know what? We're not going to follow you anymore. But like, I just find it hard to believe that the High Evolutionary, who put a kill switch in Rocket, which is the whole point of this movie, doesn't have any type of failsafe for his staff to follow him and do what he says. Like that part to me just seemed kind of like hand wavy. I would have much rather seen like, what I thought was, as soon as I saw Adam in the beginning of the movie, I thought, okay, they're going to somehow get Adam to help them kick the crap out of High Evolutionary because he's like really strong, stronger than any of the Guardians. And that's not what happened. Kind of, but not really. So that's what I was. Go ahead.
No, go for it.
I was just gonna say that's what I was expecting, and so like them kind of turning on him, kind of, I don't know. It just that
really
is not the decision.
Well.
Yeah, I feel like if
point.
that is what the decision you're going to make, there could have been moments in this 2-hour 45-minute movie where one guy could be like, I'm just really getting tired of this high evolutionary stuff, like maybe we should unionize or something like that. There isn't really any of that. And so for me, it kind of came out of nowhere. But again, having everybody leave and the ship, like in the grander scheme of the story, I'm not complaining. I like that it left us with just him and Rocket on the ship to have that confrontation. That was really cool. I don't know. I'm
just to finish on that thought before I let Kate jump in, it's the idea that you guys are around him all the time. You should know that pointing a gun at his head and saying, I'm taking command is actually not going to work. I agree. From a story point, it's not well thought out. And from a character point, you should all know better. What were you going to say, Kate?
The reason why they did that is very specific, and it's specific to what the high evolutionary represents and what Rocket represents. So it's character thematics. And I think Eric, as a writer and as a teacher, you can also jump in on this if you feel like I'm not saying it properly. But the whole point of the high evolutionary trying to create the perfect being, which is why he created the Sovereigns in the first place, was strength and visual perfection. He knew what Adam was capable of. He knew what the Sovereigns were capable of. So having Adam turn and defeat the high evolutionary with brute strength wasn't the thing, because that would have fit into the high evolutionary's thematic tone. The reason why Rocket is different than any other creature that has been created is because he was creative. It was innovative. And it could think on the fly and come up with different things. It wasn't learning by rote. It wasn't memorizing. He was his own creature that could invent things. And so the way to defeat somebody who is strength and this is what perfection looks like is to outsmart him and be more creative than he could even think of, because he wouldn't think of all of the ways to get out of it. He wouldn't think of jumping out of 1,000 feet and surviving that way. He wouldn't think of doing all of these things that the Guardians do. The Guardians don't win because they're strong. They win because they're creative. And so it was the two thematic elements of like, what are the values? And one is supported by family and one is not. So that's why I think that the team ups didn't happen the way they did, and how they defeated the high evolutionary happened the way that it did. So all of the people who I still think are his handlers, and I don't think it was like kill switch. I think they were all like monitoring him for whoever's above the high evolutionary, suddenly being like, we have to put this experiment down. This is getting out of hand. Doing it with strength was never going to work.
I've got two more things I want to touch on before we wrap up. And I'm sorry, Nate, go ahead. I didn't realize you wanted to.
I think like that makes a lot of sense in terms of like the strength thing. And that probably would have felt really cheap if they did that. I get the creativity thing. He's the first thing that had an original thought, and that was like what he couldn't understand, the whole like why you gotcha, all that stuff I get. I did not feel like that Rocket's creativity inspired the crew to mutiny, or that if there was a larger force that was in control overhead, it didn't get any type of indication that there was that they, in the earpiece. All right, okay, now we're turning on him. From what was presented, it seemed like it wasn't
like a Palpatine moment. I get you.
Right, exactly. It seemed like stuff's blowing up. They're like, all right, this dude, he's really, the animal torture was one thing, but the ship blowing up, this is too much.
That's fair.
That's all. But the strength thing makes a lot of sense, and Eric, that would have felt really cheap for him to like come back and just knock him out like that.
Right.
Get you.
Yeah. Eric, did you have something on that you wanted to chime in with?
Yeah. Well, I think one maybe issue in the sort of the plot mechanics of this one, the sort of stitching, when you have a bunch of different villains or antagonists, I should say, maybe not use the word villain so much. I feel like you got to sort of figure out how they all kind of connect, and like all these questions of like who outranks who. I think they could have done a bit better work with like how, the High Evolutionaries like plan, how Warlock figured into it, how I just blanked Warlock's mom's name.
I think they
Mother.
just call her High
High
Priestess,
High
right?
Priestess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like it's interesting. I was thinking about kind of like the Star Wars mechanics that I think it did it pretty well in the original New Hope, even in Rogue One. The idea of like who outranks who answers to who, and how it all sort of fits together. Because that part of the plot was a little soft. I thought how Warlock fit into this plan. Like we can all opine about that for a while, but in the end of it all, that might have been where some of the stitching of the storytelling could have been a bit tighter. That all being said, I mean, I'm excited to see more of Warlock. I think they set him up well. I think they could have used him to maybe a little bit better effect, but the casting is great. The idea of he's kind of like a man-child is fun. It's kind of like, it's like Groot basically, except with, a nicer accent. With all due peace and love to Vin Diesel's lovely tenor.
Peace and love.
Peace and
I
love.
love you
He's
guys.
like a mix of like Groot and Drax because he's like crazy strong.
It's almost like their kid with a little bit of gold paint would have been Warlock. I think that's
we will wrap up this part of our conversation in a moment, and I know Nate has to go in a couple minutes, so I'm going to ask all of you a show of hands. I know the correct answer. I found this out while we were having our first conversation. Excuse me. I want to know what everybody thinks.
There's a glitch in the Matrix.
It meant when Groot said, "I love you guys." Raise your hand if you think he actually said that, or raise your hand if you think that we are all part of the family now and we understand him for the first time in that moment, just like Gamora did.
Yep.
That second one is the answer that James Gunn gave. He said it's a bit of a spoiler, but yes, that's what it means. So that's why they didn't react to it, because that was a conversation I had with my wife when I saw it the second time. She's like, they didn't say anything, because I was like, well, they always understand either way. But now we understand him, so that I think that's the great way to set it up, because in the future, when we have the character, he's still going to say, I am Groot. I think that
or Vin Diesel's going to come and voice a whole character, and Groot's going to have like a whole deep.
Yeah, he's going to talk about family a shit ton.
Yeah, he's got little saplings.
Yeah. I think they should have doubled down on it during the mid-credit scene when Groot wakes up. I think like a grunt or like a fine. Oh, yeah. I think like that would have been a good way to like connect the two scenes together of like, okay, we're all in the family now, and not only do we understand, but we can hear what the Guardians hear.
I am the very
that was definitely a thing, because
what he should have said.
Because you see that happen, you're thinking like, oh, what happened? That's crazy. And then the movie ends, credits roll, you get that mid scene, and then it's like Groot, and then he's like, I am Groot, and then you go, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Did he forget how to talk? Do I not understand him anymore?
He didn't say anything in the mid-credit scene.
Did he not? Did he just grunt?
He just rolled over and stood up.
But no, it's Mumbles and Dick Tracy. Lest we forget one of the great old school
the greatest comic adaptation of our lifetime is
probably. And then one moment when suddenly Mumbles could speak very clearly. It just he just needed the right situation.
Or how once a movie Silent Bob actually speaks. On that note, Nate, I know we need to let you go. Please let people know where they can keep in touch with you and continue the conversation about Guardians or anything else that's going on these days.
You can find me at Twitter, DogLikeNate with 2 G's. Thank you guys for having me. It's great to see you guys, chat with you again. Yes, it was an awesome movie. I'm glad I got to talk about it with you guys.
Absolutely. Always happy to have you on, and looking forward to talking to you again soon. And thank you to our pal Nate, and James Gunn
Nate.
Confirmed the audience can understand Groot now. Dominica Saxon pointed out. Yes, that was my point. I have one last thing for you, but I thought that this was interesting. Craig Robinson, do you think he seeded and left like Ego then? I got the feeling he was looking to set up and stay on the planet until he got fed up and moved on. A follow-up thought on the High Evolutionary, Dominica Saxon. I wonder how many test planets the High Evolutionary made and then forgot to go back and check on. I'm going to think a lot. There's probably several counter Earths that, he just didn't think to check on. And
Yeah.
Ghost 8386, we always appreciate anybody who checks on our footnotes. So Ayesha was the golden high priestess of the sovereign, a race created by the High Evolutionary. So yeah,
I should remember that because I worked on that movie. But that's
in the second one though, they just call her high priestess all the time. So but I wanted to it being a Guardians movie, it being a James Gunn movie. I wanted to take a moment and ask each of you if there are any musical moments that really stood out, because he does use the musical cues so well. He has such great soundtracks. It is the opposite of Thor: Love and Thunder, using the 4 most basic Guns N' Roses songs that everybody knows and everybody's heard. Nicely done, Taika Waititi. That's the most basic paint by numbers.
To be fair, that might not have been Taika's decision.
That's true. To be fair, it might not have been, but he should have been able to chime in and be like, how about like one song from Motley Crue or something? But I'll ask you first, Eric, was there a musical moment, whether it was a song that was in the trailer or not? Was there anything? I feel like there might be something because I can see your on-screen description that might betray what musical moment stood out for you.
It did. I led with that. I didn't bury the lead. Space Hogs, in the meantime, one of my absolute favorite songs from the 90s. But then he also, what's fun is he could jump around a bit in decades. We got a great callback to Come and Get Your Love, which I thought was perfect. Sure. Yeah. No Sleep Till Brooklyn was one that didn't quite land as well as I would hope, considering how much I love that song. But then Do You Realize by the Flaming Lips kicks on, and I'm like, yes, thank you. I felt seen and I felt heard. And then last, This Is the Day by the.
Yeah.
That is a great deep track from the 80s. So that popping up, again, it was like, that's definitely one of the ones on my phone and on my computer I've played a lot over the years. So the fact that I'm seeing that in this movie specifically, just it felt just right.
Right. And I point to the fact that they used a deep album cut from Alice Cooper, which is the song that, anybody who knows me knows that I was going to say that one. And obviously I said it when we talked about this earlier, but that's the song that Gamora turns up on the ship. And I'm always chasing rainbows. And I'm like, wow, that's quite a choice. And he's always very good at, thinking of the songs that aren't necessarily the ones that you think of, but the one that starts off the trailer is sort of a late era Rainbow, Since You've Been Gone, which it's like not so it's I think that the music is all very well done. I've heard some similar reactions to No Sleep Till Brooklyn. I might be a little tired of that song. It was a good moment. I try to think about it in relation to the way that big fight scenes were used in earlier Guardians movies. Yeah. But it's true, it wasn't my favorite. What about you, Kate? What were some musical moments that stand out for you?
I liked hearing the diegesis of the music in Creep. Diegetic music for non-film or music people is when the characters know that the song is playing and they sing along to the song. So hearing when Rocket would sing and what lyrics connected to Rocket, because that is the most we get out of Rocket before he goes under really for a while.
And the tone that set up too.
Set up, it was very different tone. It was the first time we didn't have a fight scene open a movie,
and
it's
very clearly too. It's like this slower acoustic version of Creep. It's not the one that was the hit single, and it's not something I thought about until I went back and rewatched the first 2 Guardians movies. But Rocket is the one who we see in all these movies. He is the one who is often singing along. There are times where Star-Lord does it, but Rocket does it the most.
Rocket sings the most, but it's always low. It's not like to anything. I liked the No Sleep Till Brooklyn number. Something I just want to mention very briefly before I finish the question is James Gunn pulled out a lot of different filmmaking tactics to emphasize certain points, and the No Sleep Till Brooklyn one-shot fight, and using the music and almost like a video game, like slow-mo, fast-mo kill quality to it was really, really cool. So I think that the music, along with how he filmed it, was really, really nice. And it was a good way to pass the fight from member to member. So while the music choice might have been basic on its own, the use of it in the filmmaking style was really, really cool. And as was like when he decided to go erratic and when he decided to like play in the wide and be smooth. So props on the James Gunn and the DP and everyone in the camera department for pulling that off. And the editing team, they're all great. But I don't know a single person in my generation that doesn't have the Dog Days Are Over somewhere in there. I need to like jump up and down and like get all of the like bad energy out of me playlist.
What you're saying, Kate, is that you all have it in your Zune.
We all have it in. I have it
right
in
there
my
at the
Zune.
top. You click the dial to 2000s, and you're like, yeah.
They grabbed my playlist from when I was 25 and very sad, and then just like played that song. So like, like when he moved the thing, you're like, what song is he gonna pick? Because it's his choice now. And the fact that he did pick "The Dog Days Are Over," which is a song that I think resonates with a lot of people, just in like the unabashed joy of it. But also thematically and story-wise, it's like it's over. Like it's the Guardians are over for right now. This version of the story is over. My story is over in terms of like the thing that I had to move on from. And then just we're gonna all jump around and dance. And like he starts dancing with Groot, and then Drax starts dancing, and then Nebula starts. She doesn't dance, but she sways and she starts laughing. But like it gets everybody like a wave involved. And so I think the effect of that song was probably the most useful. It was Creep in the beginning and Dog Days at the end.
And also that's a
Right.
newer
And
song
just to chime in on that specifically, is this from the Hollywood Reporter? I'd read this earlier. The singer, the front person for Florence and the Machine, Florence Welch, was literally in tears, couldn't believe that was how the movie ended. And I thought that, when you can actually have that kind of reaction by the person who wrote and sang the song, I think it's a nice touch. And I also think that it was great usage of that song. And it is when we finally see Drax dance. And I'm sorry, what were you going to say, Eric?
No, I was just going to say, like, Florence and the Machine, it's also one that sort of connects a lot of generations. Like, I feel like, I know Kate and I might look the same age, but we're not. So my generation, which is closer to old man Christians, like that's something that I think it's kind of like Adele. Like it just goes beyond. Well, yeah, but this is our kids' toys. Let's not pretend.
I don't think they're your kids' toys. I think you bought them for you, but your kids.
They're not anymore.
Ixnay on the ooze tray, please.
I'm a little spoiler alert. Later this evening, I'll be buying 2 more McDonald's Happy Meals, and I'll be making sure that I get different toys.
One of this.
Yeah, I make sure that I get different toys. We already have a Mantis from the Love and Thunder tie-in.
I want a
Eric,
Nathan Fillion.
Oh,
wow. Yeah.
I don't think they made his.
Eric, my impression is that I believe you need to go. We're all going to go in a moment, but you need to go this minute. So
I'm gonna have to pick up.
Let's get our plugs
one of the men
in.
whose toys I have.
Starting
get your
off,
plug in, Chris.
where the people of Burbank can find you in the very near future, Eric. Start with the most important plug that we have.
You can find me at so many places, including Milton Edie's Dry Cleaners with the good popcorn and the coffee. But if you want to see me bring every ounce and pound of my old man Jewishness to the stage, well, do I have a treat for you? I am playing Mr. Mushnick in Little Shop of Horrors next weekend. Conundrum Theater Co. is the website. Theater spelled R-E because, we're fancy folk up here in Burbank. Theatry. So, yeah, if you can make it out, if you want to schlep over to Burbank, I do some singing and dancing, actually. And thank God.
If you come on Friday night, you will see me. So.
Cool. And in fact, I discovered as I go closer, I actually found out that this is a very valuable, not bobblehead. What is it? The Tokyo Pop. Like this, apparently, like you can't.
Audrey too.
Funko Pop. Yeah, you can't. Yeah. Apparently, this is like worth more than anyone in this house. And I won't tell you where I live, so you don't come and steal my gold.
I know where you live, so I'll be there to get that sometime over the weekend. And of course, Count Eric Connor is where people can continue the conversation.
Of course.
Yeah.
And I just want to leave Eric with these 2 things. Dominicus Saxon has the theory we're probably a counter-Earth. All of us right now, read into that what you will. And I didn't want Eric to miss this comment from Craig Robinson. Takes me back to the Planet of the Apes musical number in The Simpsons. Oh my God, I was wrong. It was counter-Earth all along. Yes, Dr. Zaius, Dr. Zaius.
I hate every chimp I see from chimpan A to chimpanzee. might be the
Absolutely.
single greatest joke in the history of the universe or any
Agreed.
universe.
Agreed.
I
So
am
yes,
not
it's
here.
always Troy McClure in my heart.
Except
am
for
not
Good Dog,
here
Bad Dog. Cosmo's Good
to
Dog, Bad Dog.
That was pretty great.
with that.
Pretty great.
Yeah.
And they get a next level actor to play Cosmo too. You know, an Oscar nominee who she was fabulous, perfect voice for that role.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Oh,
and the Faith No More We Care a Lot was also a very nice moment. That would have worked well in a fight scene had they chosen to use it. Ghost 8386. And Kaitlin, I want to make sure you let everybody know where they can find your film, especially if they also very, very local plugs for people this for next weekend.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Next
where they can see it. Yeah.
So
go ahead.
Uncanny. Yeah. I got into Uncanny and X-Men fan film about Rogue and Gambit after Rogue 1995. Premieres at, well, not premieres, it's already come out, but it's in Geek Fest, and it is showing next Sunday at Ontario, in Ontario, California, at the Comic-Con Revolution. So I'll be there, and most people will probably be there, like me, going to the Avatar: Last Airbender panel. But you can also on Sunday see my movie and vote for it, and vote that it's a good movie, or you can just come and say hi to me and be like, "Yeah, your film's fine."
Yes, I will be there. I will be there, and I've seen the film. I enjoyed it, as I've said before, and I will enjoy seeing you at Comic-Con Revolution.
Yeah. Oh, it's next Sunday, the 21st at 1:30 in room 106.
Yeah,
but Eric's going to be too busy with Audrey too. I know. It's
sorry.
I'll put your vote right in my heart.
I would totally go to Ontario for that. That'd be awesome. I'm sorry I'm missing it, but
I'm literally going for the Avatar. I won't. I don't. I'm probably going to be at the Last Airbender panel.
Go to Ontario. Damn it. Screw the Airbenders. Right. They don't need you. They don't want you. They don't like you.
All right.
She likes you.
I'm gonna let Eric go, and Kate, I believe you needed to duck out as well.
I'm up for whatever.
All right. Well, I'm gonna let people know that this is not our final conversation about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. But it might be the last one that Ghost 8386 wants to tune into. It might be the only one, because we had our pal Jeff Williams last week, along with David Brody. And we just had this one with some of our Marvel Movie Talk regulars. Next Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, we will be doing a panel with myself. And let's see, Jeff Duray from the Black Cast, Yael Teagle of AfterBuzz TV, Fanversation, and a bunch of other places, and the triumphant return of our old friend Zia Anderson will be with us talking about this movie. Yay, and I know Ghost, you're not a fan, so we'll be excited to see Zia for the first time since she has been very public about how she had some work done. So take a look, and you'll see what Zia's been up to. And very excited to have that conversation next Wednesday, and you'll be able to find it then. And our Marvel Movie Talk will continue very soon, because we do have Into the Spider-Verse coming up in just a few short weeks, and then Secret Invasion. So it's been a little bit of a drip, but we're starting to gear up with some more Marvel content. Thank you to everyone who is excited, and all the messages I get from people who want to know. Even if you're not in the live chat today, we appreciate it. But Daniel Drew was off to go see it in IMAX with a friend. So, I think seeing Guardians 3 versus sitting and watching us talk about it, I think it's all right.
Also, this is one of the first few movies, like, I would actually, if you want to see it in 3D, I would do it.
Yeah, I was saying before we started, my favorite way to see a movie is IMAX 2D. I would imagine the 3D is good in this. Yeah. And I think that a lot of those sequences are probably going to look good. And, depends on how long it stays in the IMAX 3D theater, because we've got a lot of big stuff coming out. I agree. I think it might be worth checking out. But
I was not in IMAX, but the tickets I got were 3D the second time, and when you go through space, it really does. The layering of the 3D is really, really good, and it doesn't feel like it's coming at you. It feels like you're going through.
Right, which
so, like, the way It's so cool. So
getting immersed by the 3D is more fun than sort of the old style where it's like they're like, poking things.
There are some moments I do have to say, yes, it is. And
3D. Well, yeah, Ivan Soto asks, is 3D even a thing anymore? And it is. But
talk to James Cameron.
Yeah, it's if it wasn't still a thing, we wouldn't be getting 4 more Avatar movies. But I know what you're saying. Look, it's not for everybody, and that's the thing. A movie should work if you see it in 2D or 3D on IMAX or on a premium screen, and see it in the theater. But even if you watch it at home, it should also still work if it's a good movie.
There are 2 shots where 3D makes you a little dizzy, which is when the camera turns 360.
Oh, I didn't think of that. Yeah, I could see that.
So, but then you're dizzy and you're like the character because the character's flipping 5 different ways. Yeah. So, I mean, if you want that immersive experience, it works. But if you just want it to be like, I just want to go frontwards and backwards, and that's fine by me. Just be careful when you see it in 3D because there are some shots where, if you haven't seen the movie yet, I hope you have, because sorry, spoilers.
Where the camera spins for an hour and a half. You better have seen it. What are you doing? Although Dominicus Saxon is the one who used to watch our reaction shows before he would decide if he wanted to see a movie. So he did. Some people don't mind the spoilers. It helps them decide if they want to see it. But I feel like all of you have. But we will see you next Wednesday for more Guardians talk. Until then,
I want a rocket pop.
I mean, look, I might end up with another one tonight, so I'll let you know if that's what happens. But yeah, and look, some McDonald's you can just walk in and say, "Can I buy the rocket toy?" And usually they'll be like, "Yeah, it's $3 or whatever." You don't actually have to buy. Yeah, I
want fries.
Well, yeah, I just want the prize. Yeah, exactly. So, but in any case, that is all the time we have for now. We will see you next time on the Blackcast and also on Marvel Movie Talk. As the great Stan Lee would say, Excelsior!